With us today, we have Daniel and Alexander from the Nuxt core team.
The name originally, according to a blog post from Sebastian Alex, also came with like, okay, Next.js, Vue, Nuxt.
Do you guys feel good about where it's at currently, organizationally and like technically and all that kind of stuff?
So Nuxt is a framework for building full stack web apps. So it has Vue on the front end, it uses Vite as a bundler, it uses Nitro as a backend, and it has a real emphasis on great developer experience.
100%. Okay, well, getting back to actually Nuxt and not just open source. I know that all of us can talk about open source all day long, it seems like. But
True.
What is the core team working on right now for Nuxt? What's in the pipeline? What's about to come out? What are you guys excited about?
Lots of things, actually. Daniel, how much do you want to spoil? Like, how much is spoiler worthy?
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of This is Tech Talks. I'm your host, one of your hosts, Jay Bell. I have with me my co-host, Santosh.
Hey, everyone.
This is episode 10 of the season. We have a really awesome one today. Some people that I've actually wanted to chat with for a while. I see both of you on the Twitterverse or the Xverse, I guess, nowadays. I'm going to continue calling it Twitter probably until the end of time. So, but yeah. With us today, we have Daniel and Alexander from the Nuxt core team. How's it going, both of you?
It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Really excited.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I don't know very much about Nuxt at all, as with a lot of the topics that we have on here. My work is pretty narrowed on the whole Angular space, so it's always great to have people like you on the show so I can ask all the what I think are dumb questions, but hopefully aren't that dumb.
Definitely not. No, always ask away.
And actually, I honestly think that it's when people who are coming from outside the space ask questions, it's a real opportunity to improve the whatever it is, name it. Like we happen to be working on Nuxt, but I really think an outsider's eye is a very rare thing and really, really valuable.
Be it like onboarding or like just understanding some concepts that, especially like us working on the thing for quite some time and like getting into all the nitty-gritty details. And sometimes it's really hard to imagine, like, okay, what if someone with no previous knowledge or maybe a bit of Vue knowledge and no idea of, let's say, server-side rendering or something like that comes in and starts with like, okay, all these concepts, where to put what. So yeah, very, very valuable.
Totally.
You'll definitely have to.
You can get like tunnel vision a little bit, right?
Me for sure. Yeah, it's sometimes very difficult.
And I think, but it goes for anything. I think, like I would say, in like any company, your new hires are a source of incredible wealth in terms of spotting your institutional blind spots, which basically they lose it after about 6 months if they just become accustomed to how things work and they become part of the institution. But if you have that moment of actually collecting feedback, even just on like what struck you, like what was different, what was not what you expected, like those kinds of things are gold. Like even if it's good, even if you're intentionally doing these things to be different or to have a different culture, it'll tell you that you're hitting it, or it will tell you that there are some weird things that need to be fixed. But yeah, and I'll apologize in advance for my own, ignorance about sort of deep Angular workings and things like that. So
I used Angular recently and it was very interesting, especially with the new standalone components and so on and so on. But that's for another talk, I guess.
There's so much exciting stuff happening in the Angular world right now. Honestly, it is, and it's we're not talking hype. Angular has this sort of deserved reputation for being careful, and not breaking people unnecessarily. I think that move from V1 to V2 taught Angular a lesson that's like deeply the importance of taking people along and bringing people along for the journey. A lesson that I think the Vue community has learned in the migration from Vue 2 to Vue 3.
Yeah.
Which I don't think was as bad, but we also have faced a fair amount of pain, and I think we're now on the verge of releasing, moving from Nuxt 3 to Nuxt 4, and I think we also are very much very, very, very concerned to take people with us and make sure that those kind of changes don't break people unnecessarily. But sorry, I was talking about Angular, as in I really do think that we're not talking hype. We're talking about very careful innovation and sort of new developments, whether that's signals or this single file component syntax, which is just amazing to see, and lots more as well. Like honestly, it is really lovely to see.
It's almost
Okay, so
We lost Jay.
Yeah, we can continue. Probably he'll join back.
All
Yes,
right.
Dan. I mean, yeah, great to hear. Like, like people are really caring about Angular now, so that's good to hear. Hey Jay, welcome back.
well. Hey, my browser just like literally just crashed. The tab was just like boom, error.
Santosh
Sorry.
just didn't like your take. It's like right, end call.
And call. I know, right? He doesn't think that all of us framework people need to be working together. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, and I'm the admin here, right? So I can keep anyone out.
Yeah, I was going to say it's almost
Okay.
like all of us like have something to learn from one another, right?
That's
And
great.
Santosh is in control of that process.
Yeah. Okay, so back to the actual episode and what we're here to talk about. We're not here to talk about Angular, despite what people may be thinking right now.
We'll circle back to that every now and then. I see it coming.
Exactly. Yeah. What is Nuxt? Can you give us a history of it? Yeah, just like a bit of a backstory for our listeners, because some of them and us haven't actually used it. So either one of you.
I think go for it.
The thing here is that actually, in some ways, I think Alex would be better placed to give the history of Nuxt because he was working on the project before I ever was. So, I mean, maybe I'll give a headline and he can fill in the details.
I'll try that.
Nuxt is a framework for building web apps, for building full stack web apps. So it has Vue on the front end. It uses Vite as a bundler. It uses Nitro as a backend. And it has a real emphasis on great developer experience, on best practices built in, and on customizability. So we have a modules ecosystem, which of over 200 different modules, which allows authors and users to hook into the innermost workings of Nuxt to make it do what they want to do and add deep integrations for different platforms, providers, utilities. And in general, we have a very high priority on this idea of choice. So we have like an image component, for example, which allows any like 25 plus different image CDN providers. We have similar deployment providers, lots and lots of different zero config targets, databases, KV, lots of things. So those would be my sort of top bullet points of what makes Nuxt unique and maybe different from some other frameworks out there. Also similar in some ways, like the full stack emphasis would probably make you think of a framework like Analog, built on Nitro with Vite. Full stack might also make you think of NuxtJS, as with the name probably. And there might be other things that are unique or different. The modules ecosystem is quite unique, I think, as far as Nuxt is concerned. But Alex, you probably know something that maybe I've missed out there. When did you actually join?
So I joined the core team in 2018. So like 5.5 years ago, something like that. September 2018 during Vue.js London.
I wasn't even using Nuxt at that point. Like
wow.
Honestly, I'm not sure I was doing any JavaScript development at that point.
Really?
So, no.
So what were you doing? What's your history? How did you get involved in Nuxt if you weren't even writing JavaScript?
Well, I mean, I did at some point start, but at that point I was running a creative agency, that was aiming to help people communicate clearly. So we were identifying what the message of a company was, so what their unique selling point, what was unique about them, what was true to their vision. And the company was called Concision. It was all about being concise and clear. And I had some tech background, so we eventually started doing. I was sort of designing logos for people to match their vision, and then we started doing WordPress websites for them. And then at some point in the WordPress ecosystem, I didn't like a lot of the stuff about WordPress, but I loved Laravel, and we started drawing on more and more Laravel concepts in what we were doing. There's a fantastic Roots project in the WordPress community, which sort of manages dependencies with Composer and it brings a lot of Laravel innovation into the WordPress space. And at some point, I was watching Laracasts and spotted this course on Vue from Jeffrey Way, and basically learned Vue and immediately adopted it for some of our projects. And then pretty quickly searched for Vue frameworks and jumped wholeheartedly into the Nuxt bandwagon. But it was totally random. And I don't think I started getting involved until about 2020.
This is so fun. Also, like, we more or less came from the same background. Like, okay, I started also with like some kind of like sites for small, medium enterprises back then, like in Joomla, also WordPress. Then like getting into Laravel as well. Also, they're contributing to some open source things. First, like documentation, and then even like writing a little package here and there. And then figured out that, yeah, Laravel and Vue have this like connection and friendship thanks to Taylor Otwell, the creator of Laravel. Back then, I think, launched a very impactful tweet that brought Vue where it is right now. We said like, oh, you want to learn React? He felt like it was very complicated, but this thing here is way better and easier, and pointed to Vue. And since then, like Vue skyrocketed quite a bit. And I also took a look, of course. I also have a Laracast lifetime license, by the way. This is a fun fact. I started building
a lifetime license for what?
For Laracasts.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do still.
Well, I should hope so. I think a lifetime. I would hope you would continue to have that for quite some time.
Good point. But yeah, I also watched that quite a bit. And yeah, then I started also building things with Vue, and it was really a breeze to work with. And then I figured out, SEO, plain Vue, a bit tricky. And then I figured out there was Nuxt. So I basically used it for some on projects, and back then, so I started using it in late 2017, something like that. And I used it for quite some things here and there. Also, of course, classic rebuilding your own website and so on. Like some classic landing pages, might be even a bit overkill, but it worked very well. And yeah, eventually I figured, okay, there's still some rough edges here and there. There's some modules that don't exist yet, but it would be nice to have them. And based on the previous experience with like open sourcing, I thought, okay, if I build it anyway, then why not releasing it? Because going the extra step wasn't that difficult. And then Puya and Sebastian, so Sebastian, one of like the creator of Nuxt.js, together with his brother Alex, he was reaching out, Puya was reaching out, and then step by step I got more in touch, got also more into working on the core, especially over the summer of 2018. And I remember Nuxt 2 back then was like on Edge release, was not like a major version, but lots of people adopted it already. And that was like the main focus of work. And I remember Sebastian was like saying, hey, okay, there's this conference in September in London, wanna join. And back then I went for an internship because I was still studying to Ireland. So like a week after or so was the conference, like asking my boss, like, okay, hey, can I get a day early off and so on? And like, yeah, sure, cool. Open source, very nice. So yeah, and then I met their first time, Alex and Sebastian. We're like, yeah, welcome to the core team. So this is how I joined, more or less. And it took also a small break in, I think, 2021-ish. More or less, I guess, like basically when you started contributing more and more, I contributed less and less, not even on purpose, but
it's not intentional.
No, exactly.
Push Alexander out. Yeah.
So I think the history-wise, like Nuxt was created in 2016, so it's also in a way quite old. But not a code base, of course. The Nuxt 3 got a whole rewrite in TypeScript and lots of things, but we get to that in a bit, I guess. And it came out just a couple of days after NuxtJs, actually. And the name originally, according to a blog post from Sebastian Alex, also came with like, okay, NuxtJS, Vue, Nuxt. Though I think nowadays it's a little bit misleading, as in it's not just the Next.js for Vue, even though lots of people frame it like that because, oh, there's a big meta framework, it can do server-side rendering. I see the analogy there and the comparison. But yeah, that's how it started with server-side rendering, static-side generation out of the box, and then lots of things came to it. And yeah, then the core team also grew. Then the core team shrank down a bit after we were quite some people, and organization, of course, with more and more people was a bit more difficult, of course. Plus handling that, plus the Nuxt labs that Sebastian, Alex were building up. So yeah, and now we are in a very different position, as well as from like an organizational point of view, from a code point of view, from what Nuxt is doing. So even though the framework is more or less almost 8 years old, it really changed a lot, and definitely to the better.
That's good. I was just going to ask, do you guys feel good about where it's at currently, organizationally and like technically and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, like for me, definitely. But sorry, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
I feel really happy with where we are. I think one of the things that I mean, I think the Nuxt rewrite was obviously a huge challenge, and there are definitely things I probably would do differently if I were to go back and redo that. But I'm very happy with where we ended up, and I'm very happy. So I see now that a lot of the issues we had in the early days, well, a lot of which were to do with things like ESM and the move to Vite, or the move even to Vue 3. So they weren't necessarily Nuxt things, but they were still associated with them. And as a user, you don't really care where it comes from. If it's affecting the framework, it's affecting you. And a lot of those have gone. Obviously, no framework is without issues at all. And there are still daily issues that we're fixing, and hopefully there are more and more edge rather than core issues at this point. And that gives me a great deal of happiness and general satisfaction with the state of things. But I think even more than that, I'm really happy with the team and community. Like that is what really gives me optimism about the future of Nuxt. And that is, one, I think we have a phenomenal community who are largely positive, collaborative, not looking to say, this is why we're the best framework, down with React. That would be a terrible response as far as I'm concerned. Like, but who are enjoying Nuxt, who are reporting issues, collaborating, seeking to help other users. That I'm delighted to see, and it's really growing. We have people who are giving talks, creating videos, courses, building UI libraries, lots and lots of things that make me feel like the ecosystem is healthy. And we have a great team. Like, I mean, Alex, for example, is a great example, who's not only making fixes to the code, but has a great YouTube channel, which I'm sure you know about. But if anyone doesn't, follow Alex on YouTube. His videos come out every week, and they honestly, like, it astounds me. Like, we'll release a feature like on a Thursday, and the Friday there's a video about it, and like with examples and a thumbnail. It's amazing. So I mean, but everyone brings their own skills and balance. So for example, Puya is developing Nitro, and he's taking the lead on that project. He stepped down from taking the lead on Nuxt to taking the lead on Nitro, which is in many ways more work, and is doing amazing things there too. Really pushing forward the boundary of a lot of JavaScript in a multi-target universal sense. We have Sebastian, who still has like a really exceptional sense for what is good DX, like what's a good user experience. And honestly, when I don't like when you're thinking, well, this would be good or this, and I'm not really quite sure which, pulling him in will totally sway the day. And I could tell you about Julien, who's just joined the team, but is one of the driving forces behind a lot of what we've been doing in terms of server components. I like his understanding, his willingness to go deep, even though he only learned to code in COVID. So he's relatively
That's really
new
insane, right?
That's crazy.
But he's super talented. and really dedicated and eager to dive into the project. Like he's essential. I could mention Lucy. Her course recently on a sort of deep dive into Nuxt, I think was really phenomenal. And she, I think, was also the one who came up with the RFC for NuxtLink as it is at the moment, and I think implemented a lot of that. Harlan is driving forward stuff with SEO, everything from sitemaps to, we have a new Nuxt scripts module, which will be out when the recording comes out. And he does, again, phenomenal work on that, and very, very deep knowledge in that very significant area. And I mean, Anthony Fu, I don't need to say anything because he's just such an incredible, honestly, and it means that I basically get to see things just getting better and better and improving more and more without necessarily, well, I mean, I do contribute as well, but I mean, it's an amazing thing to be part of a team that are all doing great things and are experts in their own fields. So anyway, that's my little sort of paean of praise to a lot of the team. And
I have to add, though,
many more that I would add. Yeah.
I have to add, though, that Daniel, don't take yourself out there of the picture as the lead of the team. First of all, you see the bigger picture. You like, I think you have an exceptional good overview and also balance, let's say, the technical parts. I mean, you're contributing, you're triaging, you're doing so much. And sometimes I really wonder, same for Anthony, like, how do you have all the time throughout the day, which is crazy. But also, like, you keep not only the team, but also the community together. Like, you are, in a way, also like a role model for lots of people out there, which also means more and more pings on the Discord, for example. But I think in general, lots of people are really looking up to you, and I totally understand that as well. So also there, that praise should definitely include you too.
Sounds like you're both in a great position.
Yeah, I would definitely say so.
It's hard to actually see so much love between the community members. I mean, from my personal experience. So. But yeah, go ahead.
I'm just reiterating that I'm really happy where things are. And I think it's not just on the technical point of view, but I think really where we are with the sort of team and the community. And that is what makes me feel like we've got this kind of positive momentum that you want to have as a framework. And also we have the attitude in the community that I think will keep us hopefully being a force for good in the internet, tech community, because the aim is not to be the bigger, to be the empire of Nuxt, or even to be the empire of Vue, right? Like, these are tools that we're building, so obviously we think they're valuable, but they're not the only tools out there. And all of us, I guess, we're people who use tools. We're artisans or craftspeople, and it would be ridiculous, ridiculous for someone to say, like, I'm a hammer person, down with those screwdriver people. It's crazy, and yet sometimes that's what discourse looks like on tech Twitter. And like, I get that it is important to understand flaws and weaknesses and strengths, and vigorous debate is a good thing. And I do prefer Vue for good reasons, but there are and I'd happily debate and talk about those, but I really don't think there's space for toxicity in those kind of discussions. Like, these are conversations among friends, and this is a community of equals and peers and people who have valid perspectives. And so
they're all just tools. They're just tools at the end of the day, and every tool has a job, right?
And you can build amazing things with all the frameworks. Like, honestly, like, if people ask, oh, should I use A or B for my personal size, like, or for project XYZ, usually you can say whatever you're most comfortable for, whatever you want to try out. There is not like, okay, this is the silver bullet for everything. Definitely not.
Yeah.
And also with meta frameworks, it's very interesting to see how some of them are also more aligning. Like, for example, Daniel already mentioned that with Nitro, the server engine of Nuxt, that's also available standalone, also used by Solid Start, by 10-Stick Start, by Analog, and probably more meta frameworks will follow in the future, and there are also a few more that I don't know by the top of my head anymore, which is nice to see. So they have some kind of common base, but I still say, okay, if you prefer Angular, if you prefer Vue or Solid, you can still get all the nice features a meta framework can offer while not giving up on the specific benefits of that framework. So in a way, I also see meta frameworks aligning a bit closer, and it's really nice to see that Nux.js, Nitro, and that also means Daniel Puya and all the people on the Nux.js team are helping with that and also benefiting the ecosystem, which is also something I see quite often in the Vue universe. Like take Vite, for example. That's one thing. Volar, so language tools. And yeah, Nux.js is definitely also one to be mentioned here.
Vite has to be one of the like best recent successes in terms of like not even just web technology, but just like, you know, JavaScript ecosystem, right? Like everybody uses Vite now. Like even Angular's using Vite for like the dev server and stuff like that. Like it's
for a reason, yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like it absolutely makes sense. Of course, right? Yeah. So yeah,
makes sense. I mean, just to share it, since I started contributing to open source, I mean, of course, I'm a big fan of Angular, but believe me, hands down, like Vue community is my favorite. I mean, they have made more impact in terms of the tooling they have worked on. Like I think it's one of the community which focuses on not only Vue.js ecosystem, but for everyone. And that's a great part, like about a community, like thinking about everyone, making sure like everyone is moving forward in terms of Vite or let's say ES build or Nitro is a great example for sure.
Yeah, and I learned about Nitro and Nux.js by playing around with Analog, which if our listeners aren't familiar, Analog is a meta framework built by Brandon Roberts that uses Angular, but doesn't use like the Angular compiler and stuff like that. It's built on top of Vite and Nitro. So I didn't even know Nitro existed until I started playing around with this like new framework that was developed using a technology that I had this like kind of like tunnel vision on, because I always just defer to what the Angular team does, right? But like we talked about earlier, they're careful with moving forward, which isn't a bad thing necessarily, right? So everybody working together just gives everybody more tools to choose from, and I'll gladly take more hammers.
And I think it's a core thing of open source, right? That the idea that if I just made this myself, if I kept it to myself, it would be maybe exactly how I wanted it, but it wouldn't be as good as it would be if we all built it together. And so where we can build things between frameworks or communities, we make them better. We all benefit from them. It just has so many advantages. And obviously one of them is also just the fact that you get to collaborate and spend time with people who are pretty cool. And I mean, in lots of ways, I think that is, when I started dipping my toe into open source and into the whole tech community, because I didn't come from a tech background at all, or even a tech job in any way. So I'm just sort of opening Twitter, for example, and getting the feel that there's amazing things happening, and that you have really nice people talking to other really cool people, and they're building sort of amazing things. And you have the idea that this is out there, or listening to podcasts. I think it was one of the most important things for me, listening to podcasts and hearing these conversations between people who enjoyed talking to each other, and they were representative of this sort of bigger circle of people. And I think that's one of the things that we get, like one of the major advantages, apart from the code quality being better. That's important, but it also means like we have a better quality of community and quality of life, and meet interesting people and hear different perspectives that otherwise we would never hear. Just from the fact that we're building the library together. So,
and it also drives innovation eventually, right? Like lots of people with different opinions, and then having ideally like more rational discussion about, okay, why we do like A or B, and maybe there's another input, and then people say, okay, neither, we go with option C, and things end up way better, even though there are more people discussing. And I also agree, like the sense of community is also a key factor. While, for example, open source is still thriving, I think When I remember, I never had like a supervisor, like a formal person or like mentor, senior engineer I ever learned from. And open source was more or less my mentor. Like all the people like commenting on PRs, reviewing, requesting changes. They're like, hey, this could be better. And it's still nowadays, like this is so much like help to also evolve personally in their own skills. So yeah, I think this is also one key part. If people ask like, okay, how to get started, maybe finding a mentor. If you can contribute to an open source project that you use and you're passionate about, it's really great opportunity. And we all are happy for people that want to contribute. And it doesn't have to be like the most impactful, crazy code change. Like so many no code contributions, like documentation, right? Examples. Okay, examples also be code, but like cookbook style. And so on, so on. There is so much more.
Yeah, well, like we're kind of talking about at the start of the podcast, right? You're only a first-time user once, right?
Yeah.
So you being a first-time user is valuable to all of the no longer first-time users, right? You'll only ever go through the learning process of it a single time. So
exactly,
everything that you think is confusing or you can't figure out or you don't know or you're wondering more about while you're going through that learning process is valuable.
Yeah.
Because somebody else that's also going through that process
exactly,
thinking that exact same thing, whether you think they are or not. I guarantee you're not the only one confused about that one thing in the documentation or the cookbook or the walkthrough, right?
Yes. Same with like in general, any kind of issues you're hitting and like, okay, should I report that? Should I make a reproduction? Well, probably there are not only 10, maybe even 100,000 people having the same exact issue. And if just one says like, okay, I take the time, try to reproduce it and show that, not even starting to say, okay, I want to fix it straight away, which would be also even more amazing. But I understand like time, people work in companies, they have to ship features, but just taking time to say, okay, I reproduce it, I strip all my business logic. And it happened to me every now and then too. Like, okay, I reproduce it and I say, oh, it works fine. It's my own bug.
Yeah.
So instead of maybe giving up there, I'm like, okay, I made that mistake. And if not the case, it's even better. Then I can like just report and say, hey, okay, here, that's the scenario. Here's the reproduction. And people have a very like, it's way easier to fix things if you can exactly like play around with them and not be like, oh yeah, I have this weird setup with 100,000 files. And yeah.
Very true.
I mean,
The community is the best community I've ever been a part of, hands down, full stop. Right. There just isn't another community out there like it.
I also think that the process of, just to tack on to what Alex was saying, the process of filing an issue or creating reproduction is a really healthy one, even if you're not contributing to an open source project. The idea of distilling something to its minimum scenario, like reproducible scenario, is a skill that you have to use in development all the time, in terms of the clarity of thought, to think like, what is causing this thing, like, and to try and sort of narrow the behavior down is a really good skill to practice. And I mean, if you think that you encounter bugs, we all encounter bugs, and you also encounter, and those bugs are sometimes in your own code and they're sometimes in external code. And basically imagine a sort of 80-20, that probably 80% of the bugs I encounter are in my own code, and 20% are in the coming externally. And maybe in my case, it's even more, maybe like 100% are coming from my own code. 90%.
I doubt it.
Actually. But the framework I'm using is also largely maintained.
Who changed the line? Oh, wait, it was me.
It blamed Daniel.
So you will massive, like if you approach a bug from the perspective of it must be somebody else, like it must be in someone else's code, then you will almost never learn, and you won't identify the situations when it is your own. But if you approach the bug from the perspective of it, assuming it could be anywhere, let's try and narrow it down to the minimum situation. Okay, there's nothing the matter with my code, and I know that because my code is now just 5 lines and it matches the documentation, so it must be something else. That process is, I don't know, it's such a helpful and healthy process for growing and improving as a developer.
Exactly, because if you figure out, oh, it is your own code, well, where do you continue? You still have to strip down things to figure out where it is. So even if you don't contribute to like an open source project, you still have to figure out where the problem is. And then you might also have that experience, but like people ask me for help, and I usually say, okay, hey, I can't go through like all the big projects. Can you like dump it down? And then also people are like, okay, yeah, I took the time. It's solved. So it's the same idea, and it happens to all of us. It's very natural, no matter what skill level you have. But I totally agree. Like being able to like have a minimal reproduction, even if it's just a colleagues or your own code, it's super helpful.
But I always think it's the framework first. It's always the framework's fault, and then I realize.
And then you check and like, yeah.
I go to a message in Slack or Discord, like, oh.
I mean, my instinct is actually often the other way around. Sort of as a maintainer of a framework, people report the issue, and I'm like, oh, it's not the framework's issue, it's the user issue, and I have to be very, very careful not to do that, because often it isn't. I mean, of course, often it is, but you can't assume that. You have to assume the first starting point is, this is my problem, and like find it out. Like, I'm not just sort of randomly closing issues, whatever, most of the time. I have to assume that it might be my oversight, and that's a totally normal thing.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, well, getting back to actually Nuxt and not just open source. I know that all of us can talk about open source all day long, it seems like. But
true.
What is the core team working on right now for Nuxt? What's in the pipeline? What's about to come out? What are you guys excited about?
Lots of things, actually. Daniel, how much do you want to spoil? Like, how much is spoiler worthy?
I mean, you still have to.
Yeah.
This is just between us and our closest friends, Alex. So I think we can say whatever we want.
Safe space. Yeah, true. Good point.
Exactly. So I think one just first worth saying is that we are independent in a lot of ways. So we have a common vision. We obviously care a lot about the framework, but it's not like, we are saying like we're working on this one thing together. And I think that is partly because of how like it reflects the ethos of the Vue and Nuxt communities, that we do prize choice and individual decisions. So Anthony can create Nuxt dev tools, and Alex and I can probably take very little credit for Nuxt dev tools. I would guess, not that we're totally uninvolved, but it's not like that's something we did, all of us contributing a little bit. Most things are done by one person or one or two people, and that's great. So like some of the things I'm interested in are stabilizing our server component story, and some of the cool things that we have around server components. Releasing multi-app support for Nuxt applications, which is a sort of Nuxt version of a module federation, sort of aimed more at a sort of minimum Nuxt environment rather than a sort of generic implementation of it. I'm very interested in some of the performance improvements, so TypeScript improvements that we're going to be having in version 4 with a different directory structure, and allowing us to be a little bit more granular about what can be implemented where. Those are a few of the things. I think there are some things that are being shipped as modules that I think are really going to improve developer experience. So we have an accessibility module, which will basically mean that your experience out of the box is that you're told about accessibility issues that we can detect straight away.
Awesome.
There's a performance hints module, which is again going to do a similar kind of thing. So often the experience developers have is that they create a project, then they deploy it to staging, and then they want to check, and then they start finding issues, which there are solutions for. Like they have an image which doesn't have explicit width and height. So when their page loads, it pops. Like I can see it all the time. People showcase of a project, and the project is fantastic, but there's this layout shift, and it's super easy to fix. Well, we have our hints module, which is going to tell people about that in development and basically say like, hey, this happened. Do you want to fix it? In fact, we might even be able to sort of write like the actual height and width to your file based on what the actual size is in your browser. So I think some of those kinds of things, we have a Nuxt fonts module, which I just released, which means that using web fonts is as simple as setting the font family in your CSS. That's it. And it does everything else for you, from downloading the fonts from Bunny or FontShare or Google Fonts or Adobe into your project, hosting them, generating fallback metrics so there is not layout shift when the font loads and stuff like that. So a lot of these DX improvements, they're sort of additive. They're not core changes, but I think they're all really going to mean that sort of increasingly user experience is going to be fantastic.
And they will have a big impact as well, because once again, you don't have to opt in if like, okay, I don't use any web fonts. Then okay, fine, you're good. But other than that, I think with all these modules, I said like we reduce the error margin of developers that people also might not know about. Oh, hey, I have to set the explicit width and height to reduce layout shifts. So because obviously people are focused on shipping features, and web dev is so big, we can't know all about accessibility and SEO and performance and so on and so on. So also just giving them a hint of like, hey, okay, did you know you better should do that? Here is a suggestion. That will ideally help building better applications throughout like all the Nuxt developers, and making them also realize to think more about certain aspects of development.
Yeah, I think what's really cool about the position that you guys as core team members are in, and this goes for core team members of any framework, the small little things that you can do to improve an application have such a large scope of impact, because there's hundreds of thousands or millions of applications built with the framework, right? Like, it's not like one team at a company is making these improvements and like it's their application that gets improved, right? The fact that you're able to release one of these, like say the hints package or whatever, you just affected the entire ecosystem positively, right? Like that, your scope of impact is just so huge, or could potentially be so huge, right? So I think that's really cool, because you can just affect so much positively. It also comes with responsibility though, because you can also affect things largely negatively too, right? If you make an oopsies in your code and then suddenly, somehow it slips through testing or whatever kind of thing, right? But I think the benefit of the massive positive impacts that are capable from framework authors is just really cool to see.
So, which is
I have go ahead. I mean, I'll ask my question later.
Go ahead, Daniel.
No, I just repeating it like that, and that's true of any open source project, right? Like the fact that one person's code can affect other people for good or ill, like, it's an incredible thought. But sorry, did I interrupt you, Santosh?
No. I was just about to ask a follow-up question. Like, of course, you're planning all these new features, but how do you decide if you want to implement these features? Because adding new features to any framework, right? It's a time-consuming thing, and probably you may have to go through some past data. You may have to go through RFCs. So how do you plan all these new features?
So we have weekly team meetings most of the time. As long as we're all around.
Not all the conference. Yeah.
Exactly. Or we meet up in person, maybe, if we can.
Yes.
And we'll have a look through. I guess we have a issue triage system, and so when someone proposes an enhancement, we try and talk about it as a team, unless we've already talked about it. And in general, we're interested in adding things to the core that can't be added by modules, which is very few things, because modules are actually very powerful in Nuxt, and even like TypeScript support for Nuxt was added as a module originally. The new Nuxt server Nitro was added as a module, and people could experiment with this new server as a module. And so much can be changed about Nuxt from the outside that actually, if we don't support it from the core, it's not a big deal. It doesn't mean it's not like you have to do this, or this is unavailable to me as a user. I can actually just do it myself easily. So that's a sort of first bar. I think I'm not so worried about adding features as long as they are composable, because this new move from Vue 2 to Vue 3 really unlocked a different way of building a framework, which is that you can expose utility functions that do a thing or set up a state, which aren't included in your build if you don't use them. So as we add features that way, we're not bloating the framework. Like we're not changing the experience for the developer. What we are doing is basically giving them tools they can use. They're then auto-imported when you do use them, so they feel like they're always available to you. But in fact, they are not part of your build if you don't use them. So that frees us up a lot in terms of how we add or think about adding a feature or a functionality. And lots of what we in fact do is implemented like in compiler plugins. So it actually has zero runtime implemented, like zero cost. It's all to do with we can improve this for you, like at build time, which is also a no-brainer. As in, why wouldn't we want to do that? You know, we can add a feature that can do some optimization for you without you needing to do anything about it. So,
And of course,
I think
there are also like the more DX focused like enhancements that are also there. Like if they're no-brainers, if they will benefit the majority of the people, and once again, don't add like either anything or too much to the framework's weight, like some shorthands and similar, then also there that might be a decision like, okay, that sounds reasonable, it makes sense. People would like, the majority of people would help that, and there we go. And of course, sometimes there are also features, like it just came to my mind, like for example, we have a feature called layers. So the idea is that you can extend Nuxt applications. So you have like a base application, you can use it to build certain like more defined, like think about it like a little bit like class inheritance, but not really, applications, which is really nice for like white label applications or just having one base for all your company-wide projects and so on and so on. And of course, if we can improve the DX, for example, there's something called named layers, which is on the list for a bit feature-wise, so that you can access all these layers in between with a certain name, like give them a name and access these assets or components or functions to say, oh yeah, we can override a component, but maybe we want to access a certain version or we want to access a certain image asset that's only there. Like these are things that would help users using that feature a lot while not adding like much to any kind of bundle size. Of course, there will be added code, but and I think right now it would be even possible to implement it in user land, but it's not that easy, let's say. So for like the average developer that has no or limited knowledge of like the internals or how to build a Vite plugin and so on, it might be tricky to achieve. But for framework authors, it might be a bit easier. And once again, if it benefits the majority of the people, it's customizable, and maybe you don't use it, so it's not added. Then I think that's also a very good candidate there.
That's a really cool idea. The whole layers. So it's like a different take on like environment configurations.
Oh, right? Even more than that, it's really more about like even composing like project layers, because sure, like for configs, we can also say, okay, set certain configuration based on env, like Node-env production or Node-env development. That works as well. But even if you say like, okay, we have a component library that interacts with Nuxt composables, let's say, then we don't have to ship it as an NPM package necessarily. We can build a whole application, or hey, this is our base application, and then we have customer needs module A and B. We can write that. And you can even apply like DDD with that to say, I have a shopping cart module, I have like a shopping cart layer, a search layer, and then I compose them all together. So
really
because cool. Like the grouping right now, Nuxt is still, okay, you have a pages folder and there your pages are in. Of course, if you don't want that, you can also say, hey, I don't want file system-based routing. I opt out of it. I write my own router, which comes to what Daniel mentioned with the freedom of choice. Like if you don't like a feature, you can disable it. If you don't like certain things, then don't use it. It's fine. And there with layers, you have also the option to group it more by feature or by domain, which especially for big enterprisey applications can help a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. That's really cool. So the composable layers, that's in development or like on the roadmap to think about plan.
That works already. So
There's-
that works already. Only thing is to give these in-between layers a name to access them directly. That's one of the things that's missing. And also layers, please Danny, correct me if I'm mistaken, will also play a huge role in multi-app support.
I think NX also has a plugin for Nuxt now. Like they released it few versions back. I mean, just in case someone is looking for some good tool to play around with multiple apps and multiple libraries, you can like break up your code like very easily with NX that they offers that out of the box.
Yeah.
So go ahead and check that out. That's a very good tool.
Yeah, I think it was a community plugin before, or at least the Vue one was, and then it got rolled into NX Core as well, not Core, but the main NX monorepo. It got rolled into. So now it's a first-party plugin. There's a Vue specific one, and then there's a Nuxt specific one as well. So I'm just looking at that. So yeah, if you're already in an NX monorepo and you want to use the the code scaffolding and the targets and all that kind of stuff, it's just install add nx/nuxt and you're good to go, kind of thing. So okay, so on that note, does Vue/Nuxt, because I don't actually know what one it would be, have a CLI for code gen of any sort or anything like that, or no?
So Nuxt has its own CLI.
Okay.
So you would be using the Nuxty CLI if you're in Nuxt, and by and large it doesn't do code gen.
Okay.
So that with two exceptions. So one is we have support for modifying your Nuxt config, so you can run Nuxty module add tailwind CSS, and it's going to install the tailwind CSS Nuxt module and add the module to your Nuxt configuration. So it will do that. And we want to do more than that. So that is coming soon. You can find an issue in the Nuxty repo tracking that. The other thing is that with a impending release of Nuxt 4, we're going to ship with code mods to actually take people through the breaking changes. And if they want to either adapt their code or opt into the previous behavior, we're going to give them the way to do that, which I think is basically like you'll be hearing that from an Angular perspective and they're like, yes, well, we've had that for years and years and years. Yeah. But we haven't had that for Nuxt so far. And so that is going to be fun to implement. And I'll probably hit you up and ask some questions about best practice and stuff like that. But
yeah,
so
that's a killer feature, honestly, like especially with like large applications, just having a CLI, like just run, Nuxty migrate kind of thing, right? Nuxty migrate latest and just going through and using something like, TS query or TS morph or something like that and being like, okay, well, I'm the core author. I know that this pattern needs to change to this pattern, so I'm just going to use TS morph to morph it during the migration process, kind of thing, right? Killer feature, honestly. It's one of Angular's biggest benefits, I think.
I remember we tried that, or like we thought about it for Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3, but based on all these moving pieces, it was very difficult, and eventually it was decided not to do it because that, like for now, for Nuxt 3 to Nuxt 4, and this is for all the people that might still have Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3 trauma somewhere, being afraid, the changes won't be that big, so no worries. And exactly also with the code mods, we try to reduce any kind of issues around that, any kind of churn of like, I don't want to migrate, not again. I just migrated to Nuxt 3. I was done like last month. No. So we also want to like provide a bit of a relief to the users. And in addition to that, what also one more thing for migration is so-called future flags. You might have seen it also in different scenarios where people can opt into behavior that will be definitely the case. To already provide like a step to the migration while there's no major version yet, to ensure that they are, well, they're halfway there, let's say.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, one question from my side. So do you align with releases of Vue.js? Like, do you do major releases with align with Vue.js, or like you do like independent releases?
So up to now, Nuxt 2 to Nuxt 3 was a Vue 2 to Vue 3. But no, we're not bound to Vue majors. So there's no Vue 4 coming that I'm aware of. There are new features coming to Vue, but they're not going to create a major release. Like the new Vapor mode will be a minor. I think one of the interesting things about majors is that everyone is asked me about Nuxt 4. Oh, what are the cool features that are coming in Nuxt 4? Whereas the fact is that we ship features in minor releases. That's the pattern. Like we do semantic versioning. So the cool new features are coming in 0.11.
Yeah.
You know,
All the time.
3.
Yeah, coming all the time.
Every month. Like we do a minor every month and a half, and it means like there's no super hype for any particular, because it's regular. We ship them when they're ready. We don't hold them back. There's not a marketing agenda. Like we ship them when we've got them. The major is just a chance to do breaking changes. And so it's like, what are the things that we want to break? We get a chance once a year to think about what did we get wrong, what was not intuitive, what is code that we should not be having at the runtime. Let's fix that and guide people through it. And we'll do that once a year. We're not going to do it more than that, unless we absolutely have to. And we're not going to do it too much longer than that either, or people get too sort of fixed to a particular way of doing things. So, or we have too much accumulating and it's too big a change to cope with. So we want to have something that is sensible, careful, thoughtful, with code mods, with opt-in to previous behavior, whatever we can offer, but which lets us do that. But it's not about features. It's about ecosystem health and making sure that we are sort of equipped to go forward. But it's not going to be like, this is the sort of, anyway.
But I also think that lots of users get that wrong. As you said, like people ask me, oh yeah, Nuxt 4, what's coming up? Which amazing features? But also giving like Nuxt 2 and Nuxt 3, where it wasn't necessarily about features, but big changes for sure. I think people, like long-term users, the first time in that scenario where they're like, okay, Nuxt 4 and it's nothing groundbreaking. And maybe even people coming from other libraries and frameworks, where it also was more common, like, okay, there is a new version of whatever, big changes, big, not only breaking changes, but also features. And I was never a big fan of like making a marketing thing out of the big version numbers, even though in a way, this is what happens with like end user applications. Oh, there's version 2 of whatever. And people are like, oh my God, version 2, everything will be new and amazing and cool. But I'm very happy that we don't go that way and instead highlight every like features of every minor version and also putting them out constantly, not like being, oh, here are all the cool 20 new features that we could have released in the last half year, but we didn't because we wanted to do a marketing event about it. So I think that helps a lot, as Daniel said, with first of all adoption, testing these things as well, like people using it, and we don't hold anything back, right? Like if there are breaking changes that are needed, okay, we'll do it once a year. This is something we will hold back because we don't want people having to migrate every couple months.
It's funny because, if you were only shipping features in majors, then you probably should be shipping more majors. And there's like this whole other side of the coin. Like, do you know how much flack Angular gets for shipping 2 majors a year? Right? Even though the majors aren't actually major updates, right? Like, and you get Angular, the migration schematics, right? So like, sure, it's a major, but like you don't actually have to really do anything and you're just on the next major, right? So it's like, there's these two sides of the coin where it's like, well, you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. So
yeah, you always do it wrong, of course.
Just do what you guys need to do to deliver a good experience to the community and the rest will shake out, right?
Yeah. I mean, I do think that is what the half of the purpose of Nuxt 4 is, not that there are a huge number of breaking changes, but that we need people to know that we can cope as a community and an ecosystem with breaking changes. So once we do it, and we know that it wasn't like version 2 to version 3, that there is a new standard of this is what a major release can be like. We don't know what that is like because it's been so long since we've had a major version. So, I mean, we're on version 3. Version 2 to 3 was massive. 1 to 2 was, I was not around.
It took a while, and it was also massive because people who didn't upgrade to the Edge channel by then, or like it's called Nightly now, they were like, oh, okay, everything new, more like not as 2 to 3 because still there was Vue 2 around, but like Nuxt-wise at least. But totally, that's the whole point, to reduce the fear of further major versions and to show that, okay, this is something that's maintainable. It's also low effort. We want to guide the users if necessary, and in the end, basically remove the fear of the people of a next major version, or a next major version in this case.
And you build that trust over time, right? With your users. Like Anchor's pretty good at it. There's definitely been a couple of times in the last, like, call it 3 or 4 years where everyone was like, okay, really, like, come on. But, you know, generally speaking, people that are actually building with Angular on a daily basis aren't worried about major updates. It's the external community that's looking at it being like, why is there 2 majors every year? Like, Angular's going to be on version 87 next year kind of thing. And it's like, okay, well, whatever, right? But once you build that trust with your community and your users and stuff like that, right, then you can move quicker in the future as well with a higher level of trust. And it sounds like this 3 to 4 is setting up the path for that, right? It's building the foundation for these better major updates later, major in terms of numbers. Hopefully you're not rewriting the framework again anytime soon, but you never know.
Not planned.
Exactly. That will be reserved for 2 to 3.
Just a quick side note. It's funny because I remember Laravel, if we circle back real quick to that, like I went also to like, okay, people want to adhere to us, like to the Laravel team and versioning to adhere Semver. So they also moved to like, okay, then we have to release 2 majors a year. And people wanted that while not saying, okay, we're on, I don't know, 5 point something and then 5 point something plus 1, let's say, which is also very interesting. But of course, back and front end framework comparison is always a little bit tricky due to like a feature set and so on and so on. But it just came to my mind, like how communities can also differ in that view. Saying, okay, we want that, we want semantic versioning there, and if we release 2 times a year with breaking changes, then bump the version.
Yeah.
At least we are not doing point X to 16 point X.
Yeah.
Fair.
Okay, just one quick question, and then we'll wrap it up and ask you guys for some promotional stuff. But how can people contribute to Nuxt? What's the path to contribution here?
Well, I think our contribution guide, link will be in the show notes and everywhere as well, is a really good starting point. Because there are so many ways to contribute. Once again, it's not only code, it can be issue triaging, it can be creating issues to reproduce bugs, it can be documentation, it can be talking about it, giving talks, joining the Discord, having a friendly chat, helping other people, which is what we are also doing very regularly. And other than that, I think if there are any issues like, okay, hey, I want to contribute, but I'm not entirely sure how to tackle that. Like, I feel there's just something missing. Maybe can somebody give you some insights? There are also ways to either reach out on the Discord. There's like a contribution channel where people also from the core team will help. And otherwise, well, Daniel and I are also open for any kind of requests with regards to that. So if you have any questions, hit us up.
Awesome.
Anything to add there, Daniel?
I mean, I do think all of those things we absolutely, I would agree. So those are all valuable, and there are a whole range of things that are valuable. I would say in terms of hitting me up, so you can go on my website and book a 10-minute call with me anytime. I would be really delighted if there's anything I can do, whether because you want to contribute to Nuxt, or maybe you just want to contribute to open source in some other project, and you just want to ask a few questions about how to get going with that, or how things work or something like that. And particularly if you're not, if you look around in open source or in a project and you don't see people who are exactly like you, then I would really particularly like to chat, because I would like to tell you that you are very much welcome. We would love to have you. And the other thing, of course, is that please, I think, Santosh, you were saying this early on, contribution, people often have a lot of things to contribute that are priceless, and they might not realize that they are priceless. And like coming at something as a newcomer is a priceless thing. And there's a lot that you will have to contribute at that stage that other people in the project won't have because they're too familiar with it. Please don't think you just don't understand how things work and that you don't have anything to offer because of that. You actually bring a lot of skills and intuitions that are really useful. So please do reach out if you do want to. And I think I would also say that, I mean, I found contribution to open source to be immensely rewarding for me personally. And I would just say that that was really what I would hold out in terms of contribution. If this is something you would enjoy, there's a lot of fun to be had, including collaborating with some amazing people. Like I'm just thinking, we're here on this podcast here and talking about that because we contribute to open source and we're part of this shared community. Like I think that's a phenomenal thing, and it's an open community because that's a lot of what we believe. Like we're in this because this is about sharing. So join the fun.
I wouldn't be here without open source. I know Santosh wouldn't be here without open source. Right? He's very vocal about that. So do it. You can't buy a first perspective. You can't train a first perspective. You just can't ever get it back. So like you are valuable as a first time contributor. Full stop. Like that's an objective. You can't argue with it, right? So do it. Make your first contribution, open your first issue, join the community.
Yeah,
exactly.
Awesome. Well, we actually went over, which doesn't surprise me at all. There's a lot of great conversation happening here.
We could probably fill 2 more episodes. I'm more than sure, easily.
I think we could talk forever. It sounds like, yeah. So we'll definitely have to have one or both of you back on again at some point in the future. Looking forward to that. Anything you want to shout out or promote before we finish up the episode? Maybe when's Nuxt 4 coming out? Is there a release date of any sort, or fall from year maybe, or I don't even know.
I would be saying that it should be up by the time we air this recording. So we were originally optimistically we said Q1. Q1 is almost over as of the date of the recording, and we had other things to ship, so we had to push Nuxt 4 out. But I think we should be able to hit pretty soon, so in the next month. Having just released, so sorry again if this is time bound, but we've just released a couple of days ago 3.11, and our priority is not to start work on 3.12. Our priority is after a patch release, we're going to be working on 4. So that's the code you'll start to see being committed to our main branch.
And more issues coming up. With like 4.x label. Yeah.
Yeah. Naturally. That's the life we chose, right?
Yeah, true. And I think in terms of promotion, otherwise, like please, if you're interested in Nuxt, like give it a go. Like Nuxt.com, we have a very simple example to get started with. You can jump right in on online editor, or just start with a very simple command in your favorite IDE. And once again, please join the Discord if you look for either help, like-minded people, or just like some nice community to chat with. So that would be, I think, also a very good start if you're interested in the framework. Just like want to look around, see what the fuss is all about, and soon you'll love it.
Awesome. Sounds good. Well, we'll put your guys' social handles and contributing guide and Daniel's meeting invitation, all that kind of stuff in the show notes. So if anybody wants to reach out to any of them about open source, Nuxt, Vue, I don't know, weather tracking, I don't know, whatever you guys want to talk about. If you just want to ask them random questions,
yeah, do it.
I'm sure they'd be happy to answer them. But thank you again for coming on the show. We really appreciated you guys joining us today. It was awesome to meet you for the first time and chat.
Likewise, thanks a lot for having us over.
So thanks everyone. I mean, it was a great discussion. Of course, as we said, like we could have actually talked for another 1 hour, but yeah, unfortunately we have to end. So we will be back in another episode with Josh. So we'll be talking about Spring Boot and how Spring Boot has changed in 2024. So see you all in the next episode, and thanks a lot for all the support you have provided. I mean, we have reached 2,000 subscribers. Yeah, our channel is doing pretty much, and we are excited to bring new episodes every month, and of course twice in a month basically. But yeah, it won't happen without your support. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and we will see you in another episode. So thanks again, Daniel, Alex, for joining us and talking about Nuxt. Jay, thanks for hosting this episode, and We'll see you again next. See ya. Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everybody.